I'm Carol Cohn, and welcome to Purpose 360, the podcast that unlocks the power of purpose to ignite business and social impact. Today, we have a very, very special conversation. You know, our mothers always said, don't talk with your mouth full. Well, today, I have the delicious opportunity to talk with Douglas Lamont, CEO of Tony's Chocolonely. And during our conversation, I am going to be munching on some of their absolutely fantastic and delicious chocolate. Today's conversation isn't just about a favorite treat. We know we all love chocolate. It's a conversation about how one company is using chocolate as a catalyst for systemic change. The company is called Tony's Chocolonely because of their mission to end exploitation in the cocoa supply chain. Right now, there is illegal labor on cocoa farms in West Africa, with more than 1.5 million children involved in child labor in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. In our conversation, Douglas shares the extraordinary journey of a company that wasn't founded by entrepreneurs looking to sell chocolate, but by journalists determined to expose injustice in the cocoa industry. It's a fascinating beginning story. You will be blown away by it. In my conversation with Douglas, we'll explore what happens when a purpose comes before a business plan and how Tony's has transformed that original act of advocacy into a global brand with the scale and influence to challenge an entire industry. Douglas discusses the leadership lessons behind preserving mission while driving growth. They have key principles he will discuss and how they contribute to building a unique and powerful business model that serves impact rather than just the other way around, and while proving that purpose and profitability can coexist, that is essential to creating lasting change. For leaders, entrepreneurs, and anyone building an impact-driven organization that can scale to evolve an industry towards greater humanity and impact, our discussion shares powerful lessons how Tony's has stayed true to its roots while growing its exceptional influence. It's a delicious, inspiring, candid, and wonderful conversation, so let's get started. So welcome to the show, Douglas.
Thank you, Carol. Great to be with you.
So I always love to ask, when you were growing up, we're always influenced by our parents. And so prior to Tony's, you were at Innocent Drinks for how many years? Many years.
Yeah, 16 years.
So you've got this social impact, purpose-driven company in your blood. But did something happen as a child growing up that influenced your leaning in this direction for your career?
For sure. My parents were both entrepreneurs. So I sat around the kitchen table listening to business conversation because it was a family business with the two of them running it. And so I think I was just influenced. And I think where the social side of that came in is they were both very focused on the culture of the company and how they they weren't the biggest, they weren't the best, but they knew that they could keep really good talent if they created a really good environment. And my father in particular was very focused on that. And so I think that how you created good culture, I think just seeped into me as, that sounds like a pretty sensible thing to do. And then I think obviously over time, I had that in me. And then when I joined Innocent, I think the kind of, this is 2005, 2006, the kind of sustainability combination of good culture and good sustainability kind of merged in me. And from that point forward has sort of, been a driving force of how I want to lead and the types of companies I want to be involved in.
And that's amazing. Was there a point in time when you were like 8 years old or 9 years old and you said, I want to be an entrepreneur? Anything like that happen?
Yeah, I was the kid that set up the school sweet shop and,
I did too. I did too.
and managed to do it. So I was always sort of doing that kind of thing. Interestingly, I haven't become an entrepreneur. Both Innocent and Tony's had some meat on the bone, so to speak, when I joined. So taking something that's already formed and then helping it really grow. And it seems to have been the kind of the blend that I picked up from that young experience of light and dark of the life of an entrepreneur.
Speaking of light and dark chocolate, I'd love to ask you and put you on notice. What's your favorite flavor of the range of the brand?
It does move around, and obviously we've just launched some new filled bars, which I would say currently I'm enjoying. Oh, there you go, you've got one right in front of you. So they're pretty incredible. But yeah, I have to say I love our everything bar because it means I don't have to choose. So the everything bar is the best of the top 6 selling flavors combined into one bar. So it's for the indecisive person.
So there's an amazing origin story for this company. And whenever I share it with colleagues, they're like, gobsmacked. Like, so can you talk about how it began? Because it didn't begin as a chocolate company. It began as an advocacy journey.
Yeah, absolutely. The 3 journalists, of which Tone, aka Tony, is the most famous, but Roland de Jong and Maurice Dekkers were the 3. So there were 3 of them, and they had a TV show in the Netherlands that investigated different things. And I guess the closest analogy with a US example is a kind of an early prototype of the John Oliver show.
True.
Is what show they had in the Netherlands in 2005. And so they decided they'd read about this Harkin-Engel protocol, which was the big chocolate companies committing to address child labor in the supply chain, which they recognized was there in 2000. And so in 2005, they decided to say, well, let's go and see. And by making that commitment through that protocol, they avoided the law being legislated against. So they said, well, let's go and see whether anything's been done. And so they went to West Africa and realized nothing had been done. And there were still over 2.5 million children working in child labor in West Africa, and were really shocked. And like to their core, they did the TV show on that, and nobody paid any attention. It was a nice episode. So that, but it really got under their skin. So they're like, we're going to do another episode on this, and we've got to ramp this up in a different way. So what they did was Tone, who was the front guy, the man in front of the camera, basically walked into a police station and said, you need to arrest me because I've committed a crime. And the policemen are like, okay, who's this nutter?
Right, nutter. Okay.
Because under EU law, if you're complicit in a supply chain or a consumer product that has been done illegally, you're committing a crime. And so he was like, well, I know that there's child labor in this chocolate bar and I'm eating them, and therefore I've committed a crime. You need to arrest me.
Arrest me, right.
So and obviously this was being filmed and it was a TV show, but it went. They got it to the court. They managed to fly over some West African kids who had been involved in child labor, and so that really then caught the imagination. The way they were telling the story, and they were journalists, they were storytellers, caught the imagination of the Dutch public to say, yeah, there is a real issue here. We should think about this. And then the third episode, the third element of the series they did was then say, well, if none of the big chocolate companies are going to do anything about this, we need to set it up for ourselves. So then the equivalent of The Apprentice, Shark Tank, whatever, they went and said, well, how could we do this? And it was a stunt. They weren't thinking of setting up a business. They literally rang around to find how they could make a bar, how they could get ethically sourced cocoa. And Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Johnny Depp one, was being launched in the Netherlands in 2005. They set up a gorilla stall next to that premiere and told everyone they were going to be there. And of course, their queue, because they had a massive queue. They sold 5,000 bars on day one. Everyone was saying, can we have bars? Can we have bars? And they thought, actually, yeah, let's really put our money where our mouth is and set up a company and do this for real. And that's where Tony's was born. But I think the really important thing is that the impact and the mission came first before even the business. So the business wasn't even in the picture at the beginning. And then obviously the business came as a way to serve the mission. And I think that's a really important fundament, and why we say we're an impact company that makes chocolate, not a chocolate company.
That has impact. You're very much the model of Body Shop.
Exactly.
Then Anita Roddick, bless her soul, she left us way too soon. But, she always said she wanted to use the Body Shop as, a framework for people who were indigenous cultures that were making all these incredible products, and they needed to have, fair wages and things like that, and give them the soapbox. And that's what the early years, the Body Shop. So kudos to you. How many years did it take for Toon, who then became Tony, easier for us to say, became a real company that was, that had policies and procedures and sourcing and
So I think the first 4 years were pretty chaotic, particularly as 3 journalists didn't know how to run a company and knew how to do TV programs. But they got it up, they got it off the ground. In 2010, they sold a portion of the company, or a significant portion of the company, to Henk-Jan Beltman, who had actually worked with me at Innocent previously.
Oh, that's a connection.
Who was based in the Netherlands, who saw the opportunity to say, I can take this amazing purpose and I can put if you like, some professionalization around it in terms of FMCG best practice to scale it and to make sure that we deliver on the mission. And so I think it was the combination then of the founders and Henk-Jan, who then post 2010, you really started to see the business scale in the Netherlands. And then the sort of international journey, I would say, beyond the Netherlands started in kind of 2016, 2017 in the US, in the UK, and in a few other markets.
So you were approached. Now you're at Innocent. You've got a great business. I mean, it's huge. It's global, wonderful product, great ethos. And then you're approached about Tony's, and it's not that developed. Can you share how your son, you said that when he was 8 and you told him that you were leaving? It's a wonderful little anecdote.
Yeah. So obviously, my son used to get a lot of kudos from me being CEO of Innocent because it's far more interesting. Most of the dads were lawyers or bankers or whatever, and no one knows what that means when you're 8 years old. But if your dad's CEO of Innocent, cool drinks product that's in their fridge, you get a lot of kudos. So when I told him that I'm leaving, his bottom lip started to wobble and he was looking a bit sad, but I quickly followed him with, but don't worry, I'm going to be the CEO of Tony's Chocolonely. And he sort of punched the air, and he was very, very much over it within about 5 seconds. So I think he still continues to get the kudos of me turning up with a chocolate every now and now at the school gate. So,
oh, nice. So you say in your materials, and I have to say to our listeners, and we're going to put this in our resources, you have amazing social impact reports. I mean, yours was like 291 pages. And it reads, it's beautiful. So, you say that traceable cocoa is the foundation for addressing the root causes of cocoa farmer poverty. I would love you to share with our listeners, because there's 2 parts to the company. There's the delicious chocolate, and then there's the marketing of it, and we'll get into that in a bit. But there is the supply chain, and it is tough. And so can you bring it to life for our listeners, and where you're making a dent, and you also, you made it larger. It was child slavery, and now it's exploitation writ large.
So I think 2 things are important. We talk about being an impact company rather than a purpose company, because for us, it's about being able to measure the impact. There's a lot of people who have purpose and visions and whatever. They sit on the wall, but unless you're actually making an impact, those statements are worthless. So we definitely call ourselves an impact company. And I describe myself as being CEO of the mission, not of the brand. And that's really important, because ultimately our mission is to do 2 things. Prove that there is a sourcing model in West Africa that allows farmers to earn a living income and ultimately get out of this exploited poverty cycle, which includes therefore not getting their kids working on the fields, but sending them to school. We've got 1.5 million children still working in child labor today in West Africa. How do we break that cycle of poverty? And we've basically, the number one priority is to establish a sourcing principles and a way of working that prove that you can do that. And that's what principally the work for the last 20 years has been about, is editing and trying and making mistakes and learning and doing it again and restarting again based on 5 sourcing principles. And maybe as we go, we can unpack those. But once you've got those, and what we see is the data, and we're very data led, so we can see that they're working. We can see that child labor rates are going down from an average of kind of, 40, 50% down to less than 4% in our long-term co-op.
Significant, huge.
We haven't eradicated child labor, and again, we don't make that claim, but a 90% reduction with a bit of focus is really important. We see that our living income rates relative to other co-ops, significantly better, and it's that blend of 5 sourcing principles that does it, and traceability, knowing your farmer, knowing where the cocoa comes from, and making sure you can trace that through, because then you can commit to paying a high price, and we commit to paying a living income price, whatever's going on in the world market, which means typically we're paying somewhere between 40 and 80% premium to the world market price to the farmer. And then the key, because this isn't about handouts or charity, this is about changing the mindset and the capabilities on the ground. So it's about building strong farmers, and that's helping them build cooperative structure. So building their own businesses, and so if you create strong co-ops, you give them long-term contracts. As part of that, we basically commit to them, we will buy cocoa at a living income price for 5 years. But if you get a better offer from someone else, you don't have to sell it to us. So we're not locking them into us. We're locking ourselves to them, but we're not locking them to us. And again, as the prices spiked in the last 2 years, we saw that they could get more elsewhere, and they chose to do that, and that's fine. And now the cocoa's come crash back. They're back with us saying, "Oh, sorry about that. Maybe next time we'll stick with you because you're there for the long term." And again, which then allows them to invest in productivity, invest in quality, invest to send their children to school, because they have the confidence they're going to get the right price for their cocoa, rather than having to ask their children to work on the farm because they can't afford to hire labor and have productivity groups coming round and all the rest of it. So that model is working. You then need to scale that model, because otherwise the big guys then pat you on the head and say, "Well, it's really nice, Tony's, but you're a micro pilot and we're big proper companies and it won't work at scale." So then that's where the rest comes in. That's where Tony's Chocolonely comes in. It's like, well, okay, I'll prove that I can scale this by scaling a brand that requires lots of beans, so you can scale that. What we realized, and again, great credit to my predecessor, Heng Yan, in 2018-19, he realized that however fast Tony's was going to scale, even if we got to $1 billion brand, we wouldn't be big enough to prove that the model worked at scale. So he set up this thing called Tony's Open Chain, which said, actually, anyone can have our beans. If you're a competitor, if you're a private label provider, source your beans through us, and we can scale faster, and we can prove this change model works at scale. And so that's what's happened. Obviously, Tony's has scaled a lot, but more importantly, so has our open chain partners. So whether it's Ben & Jerry's, whether it's big retailers like Waitrose in the UK or Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, all source their cocoa through us. And as a result, just about 40% of our cocoa is sourced for other people, and we're almost twice as big as we would be otherwise, which is how you get to prove it. And that's what impact looks like, collaborating in the supply chain rather than just trying to maximize it and keep it as your own secret source is really what we're about. That's what an impact company does.
Right. A very expansive mission.
Exactly.
And I love the fact that you are about the relationships that you build with your farmers. And so can you share the 5 principles? Because I think they are very you're an intentional company.
Yeah. So again, just sort of running through the headlines. So it's traceability, it's paying a higher price, committing to a living income price, it's building strong farmer networks through the cooperatives, it's committing to them for the long term, but an asymmetric contract so they don't commit to you, and it's supporting them with quality and productivity programs. And whilst it's not a sourcing principle, what we do alongside that is child labor monitoring. So to make sure that if you do that bundle, does it increase their living income and does child labor go down? So those are, if you like, our 2 key output measures from applying those 5 sourcing principles. And what we see is that model is working, but it, as you say, very intentional, very dedicated. I've got 25 people on the ground in West Africa working directly for us. So we're not at a distance. We're hands-on in this building those relationships. We know those farmers. We visit every household every year ourselves. So it's pretty deep.
It comes through in the taste of the product. So, and you're very soulful, which is what Tony's is all about. I would love your reporting, by the way, is incredibly transparent, and you report on good and you report on bad. And why do you do that?
What we're trying to in our mind in the change model we have, what we're trying to do is talk about the issues, because only until you talk about the issues or shine the light on them can you do something about them. And so yeah, we talk about the fact that we find child labor cases and we happily publish and say we found 1,200 cases, but this is what we did about them. This is how we've remediated them. This is how quickly we've addressed the issues. And by talking about them, what we hope is it normalizes it as a conversation, so that then the big guys who will be sitting on much worse numbers, but they're so fearful of the backlash if they ever said it, actually acknowledged it, they don't. And therefore they don't say anything about it. And they're trying to and therefore they don't act on it, because it's like, well, if the problem doesn't exist, what are we acting on? So my wish for all big companies, and this doesn't apply just to cocoa, is that there's this amazing year where we have a moratorium and everyone gets to put their SHIT on the table and say, right, this is our starting point. Our only commitment from now forward is we're going to improve. The
That's
world
great.
Will be in a much, much better place.
I want to talk about the role of a CEO in building a social impact brand. Many of our listeners want to be Douglas Lamont in some years. They want to be at a company like that. So what's your advice to them on how you are managing and growing the company to make it real and authentic?
Yeah, so I think two things. As I said earlier, I see myself as CEO of the mission, not of Tony's Chocolonely, the brand. And that's really important, because it drives the kind of decisions that I make as the leader of the company. But I have to prove also that Tony's Chocolonely is a profitable company, because otherwise the other objection is, yes, the supply chain scales, but you don't make any money. Like, yeah, you've got lots of revenue, but you don't make any money because all your supply chain stuff's so expensive. That's another reason for us not to act. So my job is to remove the barriers.
I am curious about a couple of things. You have so many structural things that you do that's very fascinating. You have 2 governance tracks. You have mission guardians, which I love, and Seth Goldman is one of them. And we've had him on Purpose 360. Is just iced tea, fabulous product. And then you have a supervisory. So why do you have the 2?
So the supervisory board is what anyone would consider a classic board. So it's a mix of your shareholders and some non-execs with the senior management team. So that's kind of normal. It's just in the Dutch wording, it's called a supervisory board. The mission lock is something different again. And what we said as an impact company, we wanted to make sure that was protected for the long term, because this is about long-term change and a long-term mission. And, me coming into Tony's, I don't want to work really hard for 5 years on something I'm passionate about. And then the shareholders change or the board change. And then they say, actually, and then there's lots of examples going on in AI. There's about, actually, we're not about this. How do you give reassurance to employees, to your consumers, that you mean it and you mean it forever? And so what the mission lock does, we basically, and again, all my shareholders supported this, including my private equity backers, gave a golden share to 3 mission guardians whose only responsibility and their only governance responsibility is to look after the mission. And the mission's quite tightly defined against the 5 sourcing principles. So it's not completely open-ended, but it's saying Tony's 5 sourcing principles, and those are written down and said the management's job is to make sure that those 5 sourcing principles and the mission to end exploitation are fully served. And you can't change legally the director's duties without our permission. So, if we decide we want to call one something else or add another one, I'm sure they'd agree to it. But if we wanted to say, no, we don't need those anymore, they can block them and say, no, legally you can't change those. So both escalating powers if management go in the wrong direction, and legal powers to make sure that the kind of mission as written doesn't get changed unless they agree with it.
Yeah, it's very parallel to the Patagonia and what they did when they sold the company to the purpose trusts, and that their only shareholder is planet Earth. And you've done a mission. It's different, but you've done a mission law to protect what you've created.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't. There's no economic value in it. There's protection of the thing. So again, I like this because, again, I think if we're going to change things in the world, we have to be realistic that unless there's economic return for investors, the world won't change as fast as we want it to. So I like this construct because it has some protection for the mission, but it still allows investors to get economic return at a normal rate.
I want to flip a little bit to pivot to marketing, because you don't buy a lot of ads. You have a very small ratio, 3%, 2%?
Yeah, 2.7%.
But you talk about little bits of magic that sometimes become rockets. So, and that you would talk about giving freedom to your creatives and that anybody can have a great idea. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that kind of cultural attitude, and then tell a story, one or two, about what's your favorite, because you do some really irreverent things, which are pretty funny. So maybe you've got one or two that you go, wow, here's a bit of magic that just took off.
Yeah, I think one of my sort of marketing heroes, Adam Morgan, who wrote Eating the Big Fish, Challenger brand. He was kind of the godfather of the Challenger brand world. He wrote another book called The Beautiful Constraint. And I think I think the lovely thing about having no money to do marketing, because we're paying farmers the right price in the early days, is that it just forces you to be creative. At Tony's, it's always been about how do we tell stories in a bold, earned way. That journalistic DNA was like, well, we're good at telling stories, and how do we encourage people to tell stories and communicate? I guess that some of the best examples, again, the bar itself, and for those who've never had a bar of Tony's, when you open it, it's unequally divided. So why is it unequally divided? Because the cocoa industry is unequally divided. And also, even within that, there's a hidden map of West Africa within those unequally divided pieces. So it goes to the origin story of where we source our cocoa from. And some of these hidden gems that we don't actually tell people about, but then someone discovers, they tell their friend, and then they feel like they're part of our club, because it's also a bit about discovery. It's about clear storytelling that tells, but also hidden things that feel like discovery and therefore connection. That's some of the things we do. I guess one of the more upfront ones we do is we have an advent calendar every year. And on day 10, we leave out the chocolate on day 10. And so when the person buying the bar or the kids open it on day 10, there's no chocolate inside. And of course, outrage, like, I've paid this for this. But of course, what we do is we explain the cocoa industry is unfair. We tell the story. And in the first years, we didn't have another one in there, and we got so much coverage, so much whatever. But we decided the following years we put we'd help them catch up the day after. But again, we haven't gone, oh, how are we really nice to consumer? Make it a seamless consumer experience. We jab things in to make people pay attention. And yeah, we get lots of positive and negative coverage for that advent calendar every single year. The 10th of December every year, the right wing UK, for example, are up in arms. GB News is like, it would be Fox News. Oh my God, this woke company doing this. But it creates a conversation. We have this, effectively what we do: create awareness, lead by example, inspire to act, and create awareness by putting friction in the system. And the unequally divided bar, some people hate it. They're like, oh, it breaks badly, and you've done it because you want me to eat more. And please, if you change one thing, just make it normal squares. And I'm like, over my dead body, we're never going to make it. Exploitation is finished, and all the big chocolate companies are paying a living income. Then I might think about it. But while the industry is unequally divided, it's just a great storytelling. It's about creating conversations rather than telling. It's about creating a conversation and creating a reaction. That's our marketing model, and why. Like in the US, we've gone from nothing in 2017-18 to over 100 million of sales now, and we spend about $1 million to $1.5 million on our marketing in the US.
I will be remiss if I don't ask the question. And when I was Chocolonely, that's what I always thought. And then when I realized it's Chocolonely, Can you explain why is it Chocolonely? And then I've heard you've had some really cool promotions around that. Like ask a man on the street, what do you think of this?
So the reason it's Chocolonely is because Tone and the other two journalists, Morris and Roland, felt like they were on a lonely journey to change the chocolate industry. And so that was the origin. Actually, they, as part of this TV film, they went to see Ben and Jerry's and they were like, for whatever you do, don't call it Tone's Chocolate. Because if you want to be a global brand, Tone is the Dutch name for Tony. Call it Tony's. And then they came up with Chocolonely about that lonely journey of change. Obviously, our job is to become less and less lonely over time. And that's what Open Chain and we have the people that join we call mission allies. And that open chain is our whole part of becoming less lonely. So we don't want to stay lonely forever. The whole point is to change the industry and have more and more people applying the 5 sourcing principle, either through us or for themselves.
So I can't wait for the day when you change the name of the company to Choco No Longer Alone.
Exactly. I mean, but if we ever got there, and I think it's a long road, we might think about it, because why not? That would be a story. That would be more storytelling, right?
That's great. As I said earlier, there are a lot of young people or mid-stage professionals that would love to work in a really authentically purpose-driven company like Tony's, or they ultimately want to rise up the ladder to your job. What advice do you give them early in their careers so that they can get on this interesting road?
So the advice I give to everyone who started their career, age between 20 and 35, I would say, don't think about going up fast, up one stream. Think about it like a career climbing wall. You're way more valuable to me in what I would call a mid-tier entrepreneurial company if I know you can turn your hand to a number of things. And so I'm not interested in people who have risen to level 42 in their corporate jargon. I'm interested in people that have done 6 or 7 different types of roles during their early 20s. So go for variety rather than height, and breadth rather than height in your 20s. Because whilst it feels important, and yes, your friend will have a one higher ladder up on the company car scheme because he's got promoted and you haven't. But if you've done 3 jobs at one level, you will go past them. So build variety of experience in your 20s will pay huge dividend. And particularly if you want to join a mid-tier company, because basically what I look for is, yes, smarts and capability and some experience in a particular thing. But I look for this: people that have rolled their sleeves up, can roll their sleeves up.
Roll their sleeves up. Okay. I like it.
Because otherwise, also people go really high up, go fast up a ladder, and then they go, oh, but yeah, I want to come and do marketing at Tony's. And they arrive. Well, what time's the limo pick me up to take me to the agency? It's like, no, you're it. You're writing the brief. You're writing the thing. You're doing the work. So again, it's not a glamorous world that we live in. It's a everybody in together, everyone around the table, make this happen kind of world, and you've got to be ready for that. Because
that's great advice.
It's not executive dining rooms.
Okay, a long time ago. How about someone who wants to become a social entrepreneur? They want to create a purpose, an impact company. What 1 or 2 things? I mean, there's many things, and you've shared many. Thank you. But what are 1 or 2 things they really should keep as their North Star when they're on this path?
Really tightly define what you're trying to achieve. I think missions that fail or don't resonate are too broad or too loose, or we'll kind of work it. So I think be quite narrow. And having said that, we're going to change the chocolate industry. That's not narrow, but it's not. But it wasn't. Be good and be kind, and it had a sharpness to it. So have some edges to what you really mean. So 1, you can communicate it really effectively, and 2, it's a useful decision-making tool for you.
Great. Okay. So we ask these really brief, rapid-fire questions. So don't overthink them. But so here we go. What's 1 word that best describes your work?
Impactful.
Okay. What keeps you hopeful in the days this work is heavy?
I don't know whether it's hopeful, but certainly determined. That conversation we had about West African farmers, they live very different lives to us, and supporting them. But also that inspiring wider change is like, if there's a lot of people looking at Tony's, if we don't make it, if we don't, I think that's deflating, and I'm inspired by inspiring other people.
I love that. Okay. What's one lesson you've learned from Tony's that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
That we all need to wake up. That if we want to lead the world to a more sustainable future, we just all have to get over collaborating in this. We have to collaborate in our supply chains and then compete at shelf. But let's not compete all the way through, because otherwise supply chains positive impact further up the chain, whether it's on carbon or whether it's on exploitation, just won't change fast enough. So collaborate in your supply
collaboration
with your competitors.
Yeah, and that takes courage and vision and generosity.
Yeah, all of those things.
What's one small action people can take today, so just an average person, to advance purpose or create impact in their own communities?
I think start small. Do one thing better. Like, make one thing in your community better. Don't be ambitious. Try it. I think the dopamine you'll get from that means you'll do more of those. Or make or buy one thing better. So, which is the store down the road that's actually is a B Corp, is a thing, but buy one of those. Buy a muffin from the B Corp, not from the one that's doing it a different way. Start small actions, have big consequences.
Super. And if you could leave listeners with one idea or feeling today, what would it be?
Well, you quoted her earlier, and she is sort of one of my inspirations, but you referenced her earlier, Anita Roddick. I think her famous quote is, if you think you're too small to make a change, have you ever tried to go to bed with a mosquito?
A mosquito.
People, you have power. And I think in this world, people feel like they don't have power, but act, and keep acting and keep believing and keep being the annoying person, and then, change does happen. We, as individuals, find your collective, and that in itself has power.
Fantastic. I always love to give the last word to my guest. We've covered a lot, but this has been a spectacular conversation. So over to you, Douglas.
Oh, wow. A big drum roll finish. The world feels a bit, so if you're in this space and you're a B Corp or ESG, where everyone's a bit like, oh God, is it all? I'm completely the opposite. I'm half glass full. If you study change movements over time, they all take time. Take the suffragettes. That took 100 years. And there were many moments where it looked like the vote would be given and then it went backwards and then it went forwards. Our job, our passion is to make sure that the next time the tide comes in on these topics, it goes higher up the beach and the breakthroughs really happen and legislation really happens. There's lots of good companies raising the ceiling. If we prove that this is the right thing and the smart thing to do, the floor will get raised eventually. So stay positive, and let's show that the path we're on is the right one to lead the world to a fairer and more sustainable future.
Fantastic. Douglas, this has been an amazing conversation, and I trust that our listeners will be so inspired to take a small action, ideally buy your product, and to be very authentic and engaged. So thank you so much for bringing your incredible wisdom, passion, and just delightful personality to Purpose 360.
I've really enjoyed it. Great to chat to you.
This podcast was brought to you by some amazing people, and I'd love to thank them. Ann Hundertmark and Kristen Kenny at Carol Cone on Purpose, Pete Wright and Andy Nelson, our crack production team at True Story FM, and you, our listener. Please rate and rank us, because we really want to be as high as possible as one of the top business podcasts available, so that we can continue exploring together the importance and the activation of authentic purpose. Thanks so much for listening.